Welcome to Bits and Pieces Quilting. Today we are going to use the force and make some really cool quilts, so stay tuned. Hi, I'm Michelle and today we are going to make Star Wars quilts. I was visiting my mom recently and we decided to sew up some amazing Star Wars quilts based on a great collection of fabric. My brother has been a Star Wars fan since day one, since he was a small child. He had all the little figurines and all the ships and would play for hours and hours with his Star Wars toys. And now, as an adult, he is still deep into the Star Wars universe. He's got his kids involved. He participates in a charity group called the 501. They go to hospitals, they pay visits to sick children, they do fundraising, they show up at Comic Cons, they do all kinds of incredible things. And I really love, especially when he wears his bad guy costume, because then they're the bad guys doing good, which I just think is really clever. He's got his kids involved. As I said, my niece and nephew are in some of these photos that I'm putting up here now to show you. Their outfits are spectacular. 3D printing in the basement to build their own robots and droids and accessories. It's an entire world, and it is really cool to see him involved with friends and with his family, and it's very cool. Now, we, as you may know, are a Star Trek family, so there's a little bit of a clash of universes here. Jason has been a lifelong Star Trek fan, but we try not to let those universes collide too dramatically. But I was visiting mom recently, and my brother often will auction off or raffle off Star Wars quilts or give them as gifts to some of his close friends. So, mom and I have two projects that we're going to work on. And I'll put a photo here. Mom was at the latest Comic Con, and she actually got involved with a lightsaber at a Star Trek to Star Wars. Gosh, see? Don't make those mistakes at a Star Wars display. So let's dive into these projects. So these are all the Star Wars fabrics that we have to work with. We've got lots of yardage here of these different prints, which is really cool. And then, of course, there are the scraps, because it's not our first rodeo. We have been down the Star Wars quilt before. And there are, oh, wait, uh-oh. I don't know, are Star Trek and Star Wars allowed to mix and mingle? Let's move those off to the side. Lots of other bits and pieces in here, as well as all of this yardage, and of course your standard black and white. So I think we're going to make two different quilts. The first you've seen before. The first is going to be a chandelier quilt, but we're going to make the size a little different. We're going to make 5-inch blocks with 2.5-inch chandelier pieces. And then the other quilt we're going to make, I need to come up with a good name for it, but it's, well, you'll see. You'll see as we go along. We'll be cutting different sizes of these squares that will all fit together with some grout, some tiling in the white to put them all together, but you'll see that as we go along. We've been hard at work sewing away at Mom's dining room table, and let me show you the progress that we've made. We have these blocks, and these are going to be for the chandelier style quilt. And after a little hemming and hawing, we decided to change up the measurements a little bit. So these are 5-inch squares with 2-inch chandelier pieces. I think the size differential is going to have a little bit of a greater impact. So we have those already. It's 39 blocks, and I'll show you the layout. I'll put a little image of the layout here. So we're going to lay these out on the floor or on Mom's bed and get the corner and setting triangles cut. We're going to get that quilt top sewn together. This was all cut out of the scraps and the pile on the table. I haven't even touched the yardage yet. The yardage is all just leaning over this chair at this point. So really happy to get a full Star Wars quilt just out of some of the leftovers from the other projects. And then this is our second project, and I still need a really good name for it. We've been alternating calling it Neva's quilt. Neva's my niece, and the first version that we made together was for Neva.
We also made nevas out of Harry Potter fabric, so we've been calling it the Harry Potter quilt. And then the first time I made it, I'll put a photo here, I called it Blue Hawaii. So I need a better name for it, but what essentially we have done is we've taken 3 different sizes, and the math is such that all of these pieces will fit together. So one large block is the equivalent of 2 rectangular blocks or 4 small blocks. So you can mix and match these into any kind of a free-form layout that you'd like. And so that's going to make sewing it together a tiny bit challenging, but it also is really exciting in terms of design potential to sprinkle these different sizes and shapes all across the quilt. And these are only 4-inch blocks down here, so we were able to cut a whole ton of those out of the scraps. So I think we're going to put this one on hold for a minute and focus on getting this chandelier style Star Wars quilt sewn together. After a busy afternoon of sewing, Mum and I have finished the Star Wars Chandelier quilt, and this is it. I think it turned out really, really well. I really like the resizing that we did on the black diamonds, or the black, I guess they're diamonds this way, the black squares. They're 2 inches instead of the 2.5 that we've done in the past. And if you remember my Walmart baby quilt, that was done with 1.5-inch pieces. So I really like this. A little bit of fussy cutting on some of these, a whole variety of Star Wars fabrics. And I think the Star Wars fans in our life will enjoy this. I think it turned out really beautifully. Still need to quilt it, of course, but this is a nice size. It's about 55 by 70 and a bit. I think it looks really smart.
So in this version of the chandelier quilt that Mum and I did, we used black as the accent, and we decided to reduce the size of those black squares to 2 inches, just to really highlight the pattern, the printed squares, and to create maybe a little bit of a dramatic difference in the sizes. But we've done this pattern before in Star Wars fabrics, and you can see here in this one's completely finished. These are the 2.5-inch squares, and the squares themselves actually match the focal fabric as opposed to having that accent fabric in the black. Different options, they both look great, different approaches to the same pattern, but a slightly different look. So, very exciting. Let's move on to the second one now.
We have also been super busy laying out and sewing together the second Star Wars quilt. And I think we've come up with a name for it finally. I think we're going to call this Math Magical. There are 3 separate blocks here. There's the large square, large square, there are the small squares, and then there's the rectangles. And these 3 pieces mathematically fit together perfectly. And there are infinite numbers of arrangements. And so this is the arrangement we've laid out right here on Mum's bed, and we're starting to sew the different pieces together. This can be a little bit of a challenge. We've got this end piece all sewn together, and then we've sewn a piece across the top up here, and now we're working our way through this middle section, and then we'll figure out slowly how these different pieces all come together. If you're interested at all in a more in-depth tutorial on how to figure all this out and how to sew it together and how to design your own Math Magical quilt, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see about putting one together. So this is the final Mathemagically quilt. I'm not sure if I can back up far enough to get it all in. It's big, but it's turned out so beautifully. And if we zoom in, you can see that Mum and I paid really close attention to the directionality of some of the fabrics. So there's lots of little places through the whole quilt where you can clearly see that it's Star Wars. Jason has nicknamed this one the Bits and Bots quilt, the Bits and Bots version of Mathemagically. I think it's great. And like I said earlier, if you're interested in a more detailed tutorial on how to plan and execute a quilt like this, please leave a comment down below and I will see what I can do.
Thank you very much for watching this video on the Star Wars quilts. If you have any Star Wars fans in your life, these might be options for you. It's amazing how much licensed fabric is now available at your local quilt shop. Thanks again. Enjoy making the most of your fabric bits and pieces.